Did you know that before the Olympian gods ruled over the heavens, there was a race of elder gods known as the Titans? They were born from the first couple, Gaia, the earth, and Uranus, the sky. And this is how the great pantheon of the 12 Olympians began. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. You might know me from my book series or other places online. It's me, you can call me that if you want. Today we're going to talk about the Titans in ancient Roman mythology. Let's get into it. The Titans are best known in Greek mythology, but their origins actually come from the ancient Mesopotamian culture. The idea of a race of powerful beings who lived before the gods, eventually lost their power and were replaced by the next generation of deities. This cycle of gods replacing older gods is called a paradigm shift in academic circles. And this one specifically is called the Iranic tradition. The Titans were created when two primordial deities, Gaia, the Earth Mother, and her consort, Uranus, the Sky Father, had intercourse. As they mated, Gaia became pregnant and soon gave birth to several children, most famously the Titans. In some versions of the myth, Uranus wasn't too happy with the prospect of fathering children with his wife, so he kept trying to prevent her from giving birth, but each time he did, the children would simply come out anyway, except instead of being full-grown adults, they were monsters. So we have Gaia to thank for those pesky labor pains, but also thanks, I guess, to Uranus, because without him, none of this would have happened. In another version of the myth, Gaia begged her son Atlas to hold up the sky for her, and he agreed to do so for all eternity. That doesn't sound like something any of us would agree to, but hey family, I suppose. Now depending on what region of Greece you ask about the myths from, the number of Titans ranges somewhere between 12 and 20. The Romans would take that number and use it to correspond to the number of Olympians, but the Greeks never really did that. Now, the most important of these primordial deities are Cronus, Rhea, Oceanus, Tethys, Hyperion, Iapetus, Cus, Crius, Phorcys, Ceto, Menetius, and Phoebe. These are the ones who show up the most often in literature. Now, many of them had children of their own. In fact, let's look at our boy Cronus here. He was the youngest of his siblings, and he was really cocky. In fact, he wanted to be king of the gods after Uranus, so he went to his papa and told him that he needed to pass the torch. Of course, Uranus didn't think that that was a good idea. He thought that Cronus was just too young, but Cronus got fed up with waiting, so he grabbed his trusty scythe and castrated his dad. So now that Cronus was the boss man, he and his wife Rhea decided that they should rule over all of creation together. But the prophecy said that one of their children would end up overthrowing him, just like he had done to his father. Now, he wasn't having that, so he swallowed his first 5 children. What a nice dad. But Rhea managed to hide their youngest, Zeus, and then tricked Cronus into swallowing a stone instead of Zeus. As Zeus grew up hidden away, Cronus grew weaker with each thing that he swallowed. Eventually, Zeus rescued his 5 siblings from their father's belly, and together, they launched a war against the Titans. This conflict is known as the Titanomachy. It lasted for 10 years and was brutal, with casualties on both sides. But ultimately, the Olympians prevailed and defeated the Titans. They chained up the Titans and threw them into Tartarus, which was the deepest part of the underworld. After they won, Zeus and his siblings started to divide the universe amongst themselves. Poseidon got the seas, Hades got the underworld, and Zeus got the sky, and all of the Olympians got Mount Olympus. Okay, quick break to say that. If you haven't done it already, subscribe to our channel to learn more about ancient mythologies and stories. And if you want to be the first just to say first, click the bell icon to get notified as soon as we upload a new video. Okay, back to the story. The Romans would later take this Greek myth and make it their own. And when they did that, they did not disappoint. When the Romans adapted the myth of the Titans, they changed the names slightly. So while the Greek Titan Cronus was the leader, the Roman Titan was Saturn. The Greek Titan Rhea became Ops, and the Roman Titan Atlas was called Atlas. Unlike the Greeks, the Romans really liked to anthropomorphize their deities, even the chthonic ones. And they especially liked to make them into wise old men. So, the Romans associated Saturn with agriculture and abundance, which, to be fair, Saturn was seen as a bringer of plenty in Greek mythology as well. But it was just the Greeks' way of writing him off as an old, fat, drunken guy who liked to party. But the Romans, They liked to imagine him as a bearded, regal figure wearing a crown and holding a sickle. That sickle represented the cutting down of grain during harvest season. And that's probably why he was later depicted with a wreath of wheat on his head. Saturn was also associated with the god of wine Liber, who was the Roman equivalent of Dionysus. Liber, according to some sources, was the son of Saturn and Ops, but other sources said that he was a freed slave, and others said that he was a divine spark that came from the sky. You know, classic god stuff. In Roman mythology, Saturn was the father of the three Horai, which were the spirits of the seasons, and the three were closely tied to the progress of agriculture. His main festival was the Saturnalia, which was celebrated in mid-December. This was a week-long celebration filled with feasts, gift-giving, gambling, drinking, parades, and parties. It was such a big deal that even the emperor was required to attend. And during the festival, slaves and masters would switch places for the duration. And this was meant to symbolize a return to the mythical Golden Age, when Saturn ruled over Earth and everything was perfect. As for Ops, she didn't get a holiday named after her. But she was still pretty popular, mostly because she was the mother of the most important gods in the Roman pantheon. She, too, was often depicted as an old woman with a crown and a sickle. Usually, she was depicted with a cornucopia or a wreath of corn. In art, she was usually shown with her son, Saturn, sometimes with Liber. And she was also sometimes shown with a small group of female deities called the Genii, which were spirits of fertility. Then there was Atlas. Remember him? Well, he didn't get off so easy when the Romans adopted the Greek myth, like his Greek counterpart, who was trapped forever for rebelling against his son. The Roman Atlas was allowed to leave Tartarus every year and spend time with his friends and family. And it was actually a big deal. In fact, the poet Ovid described the scene in great detail in his Metamorphoses. Atlas also showed up in art more often than his fellow Titans. He usually was depicted as an old man, too, sometimes carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. But other times he was shown holding up the sky, or the celestial globe. He was even shown as the center of a world map used by the Romans. So yeah, the Titans were generally regarded much better by the Romans than the Greeks. I mean, the Greeks kind of wanted to forget that they ever existed. Anyway, that's going to be it for today's episode. Let me know your thoughts on the Titans in the comments below. And remember, subscribe if you want to learn more about the crazy origins of ancient mythologies. Look out for our next video, and stay fresh until we create another awesome video for you. See you next time.